and welcome back to Ag on the Edge. I'm your host, Louise Lampera, and joining me here today, we have a very special guest. As our viewers know, Ventura County agriculture is one of the top 10 producing agricultural areas in the United States. Our 2.1 agricultural industry is part of the foundation of Ventura County and California's economy. And today, our guest is the woman charged with protecting and promoting that very industry. Welcome, Ag Commissioner Korinne Bell.
Thank you, Louise.
Hi, Korinne. How are you doing?
Good. How are you?
Good. I'm so excited to have you here.
Well, thank you. I'm very happy to be here.
So, looking forward to this conversation. But first, let's introduce you to our listeners
Sure.
a little bit here. You grew up in agriculture.
Mm-hmm.
You're from a multi-generational ag family.
Yes.
Here in the county. But you didn't pick ag as your first career choice.
Mm-hmm.
So would you tell us a little bit about your path and how you came back and
Sure.
all of that?
I could start with the multi-generational part. My ancestors were the first land grant in California. My ancestor, Don Manuel Dominguez, was the first governor of California.
Wow.
When the capital was in Monterey. So I have really deep roots in this state and in agriculture, farming and ranching. And so I grew up in Santa Paula, initially was an orange ranch. My dad's dream was always to own his own ranch and property, and my grandfather was in land real estate, and so he would buy and sell these ranches, and my dad would fall in love with them as a kid. And so his goal was buy something and hold on to the land. And so he bought the ranch in Santa Paula when I was born. And so I technically lived in Malibu for the first 3 years of my life, but all of my memories are in Santa Paula. And my dad had 3 agricultural businesses that kind of all depended on each other. And so one was the farming, and then the other was his cattle, and then the other was these animal feed stores. And so they were like a 3-legged stool. And he, if the cattle market was bad, hopefully the stores helped, keep the business alive. And then if, we had crop failure, then, so on and so forth. So the 3 work together. Kick a leg out of that stool, the whole thing falls apart. And so in going to school, I fell in love with Cal Poly in 6th grade. We went up for the Cal Poly bull test, and I recommend, if you want your kid to get into the college that they dream of, start early, because I had a goal in 6th grade. I am going to get to Cal Poly, and
carried you all through high school. Yeah.
Yep. And so that was my goal, get to Cal Poly. And I didn't really know what I wanted to do other than, I knew I wanted to work in agriculture of some sort. And because he had 3 kind of separate businesses going, I picked ag business as my major. So I did a little bit of fruit science. I did a little bit of marketing. I did a little bit of animal science, kind of combining all 3 of, the agricultural businesses that my family had going. And then when I graduated, I ended up working for the family for about a year. And I was commuting between his 3 feed stores. So one was in Malibu, where, that was his flagship store. One was in Ojai, and then one was in Canyon Country. And my sisters, my one sister Katie was managing the Ojai store. My sister Casey was managing the Malibu store, and Canyon Country kind of had a vacancy, so to speak. And so I kind of assumed that maybe I would just manage that store. My dad ended up selling that store and purchasing his cattle ranch up in Fraser Park, and that was kind of the culmination of his dream come true. And so that store was not an option anymore. So then I'm commuting between the 2 stores, kind of trying to get into the farming a little bit, help with the cattle as much as I can, really just trying to find my niche. And my sister was on maternity leave, and so I was managing, helping manage the Ojai store in her absence, and the paychecks came to the house. And I happened to look at my sister's paycheck, which was a big mistake. And I noticed that, at the time, this was a while ago, that she was making like $20 an hour and I was making $9. So I thought I'd have this mature conversation with my dad and say, Dad, I've got this ag business degree from Cal Poly. I really, want to take on more responsibility. And, what do you think about giving me a raise? And he looked at me and he said, well, you're not worth the $9 an hour I pay you.
Oh.
And that sounds like a terrible story, but it was such a gift that he gave me. And so I thought, all right, well, I'm going to go dig ditches before I work for you another day. And so I ended up taking the first job that came to me, which was teaching at a local Catholic school, in Santa Paula. And my first year, I absolutely hated it. But I was bound and determined I was going to give it my all. And so my second year, I had a wonderful class, and I fell in love with the whole idea of teaching, and decided to go back to school and get my master's and my credential. And, so I was teaching for about 4 years, and I was just, unfortunately, at Catholic school because, they were used to not having to pay nuns. They've just never paid as well as, in the public schools. And so I was making pennies at the Catholic school, doing odd jobs, tutoring and summer work. And so at the time, the ag commissioner's wife was the 4th grade teacher, and she had said, well, why don't you go work for the ag commissioner and do data entry? They're always looking for folks. And so I spent that summer inputting pesticide use reports from 7 a.m. to 4 p.m. every single day.
Oh, that sounds thrilling.
It was the world's most boring job. And I really do admire people who can do data entry all day, because it is a gift. It's not my gift. But anyway, they found out that I had this ag degree, and so they asked me, hey, do you want to go on a ride along with us? And I said, oh, sure. And so we went to Limonera, and we were looking at lemons destined for Japan, and I was like, this is kind of fun. This is a job I never even knew existed. And then I went on a couple more ride-alongs, and then they happened to have an opening, and I thought, you know what? Maybe I should give this a shot. And so I ended up talking to my principal, because I had just gotten my credential. I had just gotten my master's, and and I remember talking to my dad, and he said, well, you're a teacher, you're not a bureaucrat. And and anyway, I remember talking to the principal, and she's a dear friend now, and incidentally was my 6th grade and 8th grade teacher. So
oh, wow.
Love our small community. And then I ended up working for her at the school. And she said, you're no good to me if you're looking out the window. And so I thought, I have to give this ag degree a try. And so I left teaching, and I went to the ag commissioner's office, and I never, ever looked back.
Wow.
I absolutely found my calling. And that comment my dad made about you're not a bureaucrat, you're a teacher. He really felt like, working for the government was like working for the enemy, right? And but once I started working for the ag commissioner's office, friends of his would come up to him and say, we are so glad we have someone with her background working in government, because we need that ag empathy. And so I think that's what I brought to the table. Was I coming from ag, I understood the complexities, and I could bring that empathy to the work that we do. And so anyway, here I am almost 20 years later, sitting here as ag commissioner, and like I said, I haven't looked back. It's been a very rewarding career. And the great thing about being an ag commissioner is you have to start from, you can't graduate from college and become an ag commissioner. You have to start at the bottom and work your way up. And so I can easily say to my staff, I have been in your shoes, I have done that job. And it, gives you that credibility with your staff. And so.
And it seems to have starting with data entry, and then going out in the field and doing inspections and other work, working your way up with your background, growing up in an ag family, understanding the needs of ag, you actually capitalized on both. To kind of update what your dad said, it seems like you are both an educator and a bureaucrat.
Absolutely. I mean, my degree was not wasted. I think I find myself in the role of teacher, every day in this job. So we definitely are, as regulators, we are educators often.
Right.
So it is definitely come in handy. And I feel like every experience I had leading up to coming to work for the Ag Commissioner's office prepared me for the role I'm in today.
See, and I love hearing that, because I have a little bit of an unconventional career path, and but yet I feel the same. Every job I've ever had, every career, every change of career has given me the skills to do what I do today, which is kind of a combination of educating the general public about ag and the regulations, and then educating our regulators and policymakers about agriculture and everyday business, the back and forth. And so that's why I think I enjoy working with you so much. So,
Well, thank you.
So a lot of our listeners are not in agriculture. So could you talk a little bit about what does an ag commissioner do exactly?
Well, I get asked that question a lot. You'd be surprised how few people, like I said, including myself, I did not know this job existed, how few people know what it is that we do. And so we often struggle with that elevator conversation where you either get too technical or you get too general.
Well, feel free to get technical, and I'll ask clarifying questions. So.
Well, the general, answer is we protect, people. We protect the food that we eat. We protect the environment. We protect farm workers. We protect our food source. And so, but you can't do that without, the protect and promote, right? It's a balance. And so, yes, we are regulators, but, you protecting and promoting is not mutually exclusive. You need to be able to, ag needs to thrive in order to have something to protect. And if you don't promote ag, it doesn't exist, right?
Right.
And so we take that role very, very seriously in our office. We, feel that if ag ceases to exist in our county, we're out of a job. So we understand that clearly.
Yeah, and we're out of some food too.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah. So, the promoting part, if you promote, there's different sectors in ag, there's different stakeholders, right? There's the consuming public. There's the farm worker community. There's the farmers. There's the applicators. There's the people that sell, the people that ship, all the different sectors of agriculture. And if you promote one too much, the other is failing. And so it's this balancing act of making sure all of those players are heard and taken care of, and you don't promote one over the other. If you do, then you fail at this job. And so that's more of a general explanation of what we do. I mean, I can go into the various programs that we do. One of the most famous, or I guess the things we're most well known for, I suppose, is our pesticide use enforcement program. And that's where we have inspectors that go out into the fields and monitor applications of pesticide applications, and they're unannounced. And so the idea is that we're actually seeing what's going on in the field. We also conduct inspections of when they're mixing and loading those chemicals, so that we ensure that those are being done according to the laws and regulations and the label of the products. we go out and conduct field worker safety inspections where we interview field workers in their language. So one of the things we've noticed in Ventura County is that not everyone speaks English or Spanish. We have, about 5 different dialects that are spoken. And one of the main ones is Mixteco, and it's not a written language, it's an oral language only. And so we were able to hire a trilingual person to assist with our field worker safety inspections, because we were noticing that we were not able to effectively interview field workers. We would have to talk to their supervisor, which isn't always, you want to be able to talk to the workers themselves to ensure that they're actually being trained in pesticide safety. And so, several years ago, the county was able to provide us with a position, and we really value that work that we do, and it's very important in our county. Also, there are, I mentioned there's about 5 different dialects spoken, and so the Farm Worker Resource Program in Ventura County, which is also, fairly unique to our county, has staff that speak those different languages, so we can utilize their services if needed. But it's been really valuable to have our own staff member who is trilingual
and who also understands, right, the what the regulations are.
Absolutely.
And what people are required to be trained in.
Correct.
So that, they can engage in that dialogue directly.
Right.
So
pesticide use enforcement, we also conduct headquarters inspections where we go out to the farms and make sure their pesticides are stored correctly, their paperwork is in order, their training records are in order. We also, a lot of people don't think about this, but we also do the non-ag side. We also inspect when your house is being fumigated, that is being done.
Oh, wow.
Right.
Yeah.
And then also people that go out and spray for ants or termites, we inspect those to be done, that you make sure those are done according to the laws and regulations, or gopher control in landscape situations like golf courses or the non-ag settings, so residential areas. So we do all of that. So if you use a pesticide, we have authority. In this job, a lot of the anti-pesticide activism that goes on, it's not the issues and illnesses are not happening in ag. They're happening with home use products. If someone, for instance, uses a product or feels they're exposed to a product and goes to a doctor is required by law to file a report with the state, and then we are mandated to investigate that. And so a vast majority of the illness investigations that we do are people using home use products. So
people who just go to Home Depot, say, this says it'll address whatever my issue is, ants, aphids, whatever. And then they go home and they don't have the training, they don't have the PPE.
Correct.
It's not being overseen.
Correct. And bleach is a big example, right? Bleach is a pesticide. It's a microbial side.
Oh.
And so bleach can be a very, very effective tool if used properly, but used improperly can be toxic or fatal. And that's what I remind people about, the whole controversy with using pesticides is pesticides can be a useful tool, but they have to be used correctly. And that's, bleach is a prime example. And we get a lot of our investigations that we do are home use products like bleach.
Wow.
So that's one area that we're, well known for. Another area that we're well known for is we inspect produce that is destined for other countries, so all of our exports. And, it's not entirely well known, but Ventura County is the number 5 exporting county in the world.
Really?
We truly feed the world. So our exports are very, very important to our economy. And so the food that we grow, we inspect those shipments to ensure that those shipments are free from the pests and diseases that the importing countries don't want. Also, we inspect shipments that come into our county to make sure that they're free from the pests and diseases that we don't have and that we don't want. And so we have a team of folks that their job is to go out to the Home Depots and Lowe's and make sure that the plant material that they've received is clean and free of pests and diseases and before those plants can be sold. Or they go out to FedEx and UPS and they open up boxes of plant material to ensure that they are free from pests and diseases. And we find things. And so we, if something is found, that plant material is put on hold and it's either sent back or destroyed. And so that's how we protect our agricultural industry in Ventura County, is by keeping out the pests that we don't have, and we protect our trade by ensuring that whatever pests and diseases we have here don't leave our county and we don't, send them on a shipment to another country, and that helps, contribute to the great reputation we have worldwide. And
Right.
so that robust program is what makes us, the number 5 exporter in the world. Now, it also helps that we have the largest vegetable seed distributor in the world located here in Ventura County. But we also, our number 1 export is not seed. It's actually, lemons and strawberries and blueberries. And, so we do export quite a bit here. So that's another program that we're, well known for. So that group also will inspect commercial nurseries and do annual checks to make sure that they're free from pests and diseases, and that those nurseries are only growing clean plant material. And so that, we also have a team that is very specialized. We are infested with an insect called the glassy wing sharpshooter, which vectors a deadly disease to wine grapes. And so we have a very robust nursery industry here in Ventura County. We're actually number 3 in the state for nursery.
Really?
And so in order to, again, promote trade, we have a team of folks whose job is to inspect every leaf of every plant that is being sent to parts of the state, wine-producing parts of the state, that are not infested with this insect. And so Napa and Sonoma, for example, take this program so seriously that all plant material is, if you're going to send plant material to Napa or Sonoma, it has to be sprayed with one of 2 chemicals, because these 2 chemicals are considered tried and true. And but that's how scary it is for them. But if we did not have that robust program, we would lose that market and not
They
be able.
go buy from somebody who does have a robust program.
Correct.
Yeah.
And incidentally, I didn't mention this, but we have been told that we have the most effective and robust enforcement program in pesticide use enforcement in the state.
Really?
So
Wow.
the Ag Commissioner system is unique to California. Every other all this other work in every other state is done through the state. And so because California agriculture is so critically important, the system was established where we have local control and local authority. Yes, we take direction from the state, but every county is a little bit different with the nuances and then what we grow. And so the idea is that you have local control and authority that are experts in your own area. And so the Ag Commissioner system is unique to California. So if you have an extra layer of oversight in California for food safety, and then if Ventura County has been identified as having the best enforcement program in the state, the food that is grown here is arguably safer than anywhere else in the world.
Wow.
And so that's something that we're very, very proud of here in Ventura County.
Wow. Wow.
Other programs that are of lesser known but equally important are, our farmers market program, where we certify that they're only selling what they grow, and then we go to the market and make sure that they're only selling what they grow. And so we'll go to the farm, will verify that they're growing all of these things, provide a certificate, and then go to the market and make sure that they're only selling what they've grown.
So I've seen at farmers markets, and I never really, put it together, but you'll see on some of the banners, that they have set up in their various stalls, such and such farms, we sell what we grow. So I didn't realize that was a requirement.
That is, it's actually a regulation that was
Wow.
passed, is that they make that statement. And so we work with other counties. So if you become certified in your home county, you are allowed to use that in any farmer's market across the state. So the term
Okay.
local is defined as the state of California. That's why you can get peaches in Ventura County, also, at farmers markets, all
Right.
times of the year. We don't grow a lot of peaches here, as you know, but other parts of the state do. And so if you become a certified producer, that certificate is good anywhere in the state. And so farmers market managers who want to provide an array of products for their customers will seek out different counties, different growing seasons to be able to provide people, the freshest fruits and vegetables available. And so you'll often have people from different counties selling at these farmers markets. So a lot of times people think, these are just my backyard growers or the people growing in my backyard. Not necessarily. So it's, the state of California. But that's also very important, is that, if you go to a farmer's market, that it is a certified farmer's market, because that means that there's this oversight. And so, one of the things that we verify is that every product that is on their table is actually listed on their certificate. And if we have questions, let's say someone was selling from Fresno, we work with that other county and we say, hey, this is what was on their table. We take photographs. Can you go out and look in the field and verify that this is actually what the stuff they're growing looks like?
Wow.
And we often find that, if there is an issue, sometimes that they'll supplement, buy from, the LA produce market and sell it
Wow.
as if it were their own. And that's, obviously not the point. The point is that people deserve to know that they're getting what they're paying for, and that we take that role very, very seriously and work collaboratively with the state to ensure that any of those bad players are weeded out of the farmers market system. So that's something we take very, very seriously. Another program that we work in is the California State Organic Program. So similar to the Ag Commissioner system, which is unique to California, California is also the only state that has their own state organic program. Most states operate under the National Organic Program. And so in order to be sell your product as organic, at a minimum you have to be registered with the state. And then if you sell over a certain amount, you have to be certified by a third party. And so we provide those audits for the third-party certifier. So we basically go through their certification process and verify that everything is in order and that this is being done correctly. And so it is very, very expensive to farm organically, and very hard to do it correctly. And so we're there to make sure that it is being done correctly, and that people, if they choose to buy organic, are getting exactly what they think they're getting.
That the reality meets the claim.
Right.
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 Yeah, wow.
Right.
Wow.
So I could go on, but those are kind of the main programs that we work in. We also recently acquired our weights and measures program, which, admittedly, I'm still learning because I came up on the ag side. We were the last county to merge with weights and measures by like 37 years. So we're now, a merged county. So every county ag commissioner is also weights and measures. And so the work that we do in weights and measures is entirely about consumer protection. So we go to gas stations and verify that you are getting every ounce of gas that you're paying for, and that you're being charged correctly for that.
Those little seals.
Correct. We will put the seals on the gas pumps, every gas pump, not just one seal for a gas station.
Right.
Every gas pump gets tested. And so we verify that you're getting every drop of gas that you're paying for, and that you're being
Well,
charged
thank you for
correctly.
that with the price of gas.
Right? Very important. And then, we go to the grocery stores and we check that their scales are accurate, that they're
Oh,
accurately
wow.
measuring. And so food that is weighed and then a price is based on the weight, we verify, we do package inspections where we actually take the food out of the package. We weigh the package separately and we weigh the food separately to make sure you're only being charged for the food and not the packaging material.
Oh, wow.
So we go to places like Target and we verify that the sticker price on the shelf, we will do like secret shopping. We'll fill a shopping cart up with random products, and then we'll go up to the check stand and actually check out, and then we verify that we were charged the advertised price on the shelf. And so we do that, in any place that has a scale, any place that sells retail. We'll go to where they sell jewelry and we'll test jewelry scales to make sure, or we'll go to a packing house and test the scale where they're weighing these pallets of fruit and vegetables. So, or whatever. I mean, it's not just ag, right? It's,
Right.
Any kind of,
Wow.
anywhere where they sell something by weight, or volume.
Or volume, right. Something measurable.
Measurable,
Yeah.
we are there
Wow.
testing. So propane tanks, the world of weights and measures is tremendous. And so we have a team of people that that's all they do all day long is consumer protection. And so we're very excited to have a combined department now and be aligned with the rest of the state and be able to provide that service in a unified.
And listening, to you talk about, even the ag side. I've worked primarily with you on, how will this proposed policy impact farmers' ability to farm, things like that, and had those sorts of discussions with you. I had no idea how much of your office really is overall a consumer protection
Yes.
agency. From how food's grown, are people getting what the labeling is claiming,
Right.
Do they know where their food is coming from? I just paid for a pound of oranges. Did I get a pound of oranges? Or I paid for 10 gallons of gasoline. I better not have only gotten 9.5
Right.
gallons, right?
Right.
So yeah, that you actually have a huge overall protecting the consumer focus.
Yes,
And
absolutely.
yeah, I didn't realize, how big that was. That's amazing.
Yeah.
So,
Yeah. Thank you.
but I want to go back, to one of the things that you mentioned was inspecting incoming plant material, and to protect our farming operations here so that we're not importing pests.
Right.
Insects that, have no natural predators here.
Right.
And you kind of had a quite a welcome, right? after you were first appointed. And I think, you had phrased it as, this is something that happens once in an ag commissioner's entire career / lifetime. And it happened to you twice in the first few months, where we had not just one, but 2 pest infestations.
Right.
And can you talk about those?
Sure,
And
sure.
and the experience and
Yeah.
welcome to the job, right?
Right. Baptism by fire. I mean, I did have the benefit of, I've worked for this department for many years, and I had the benefit of being the number 2 for 7 years, and I worked under 4 different ag commissioners.
Oh,
and so
wow.
I had the benefit of being able to see what the job was really like. Ed Williams, my immediate predecessor, he would have loved being in the situation. Not that it's a happy or good situation, but that was his, his area of expertise.
Well, he's an entomologist, right?
Correct.
Yeah.
And so I just remember thinking, oh boy, I can't believe this happened, practically the minute Ed's out the door. I mean, go figure. So, two things happened. One was the arrival of HLB in our county, so Wanglungbing, the deadly citrus disease that is spread by the Asian citrus psyllid.
And that's the insect / disease that 5-10 years ago decimated Florida.
Correct.
Right.
Good.
Yeah.
And they are basically, Florida is treating, because it is deadly and there's no cure, Florida's basically treating orange trees like a rotational crop at this point. The trees, they plant the trees, they know they're only going to live a certain time, and they're going to die, and they have to replant them.
And I guess we should clarify that when we say deadly disease, it not to you or me.
Correct.
But
to the tree.
But to the citrus tree.
To the tree, correct.
Right.
And so, a healthy citrus tree can live 40 to 60 years.
Wow.
And so you've got, now they're growing them and they're dying within 5. And so it's a
Wow.
very different model than what they're used to. And so we, luckily in California, we have been able to kind of watch what happened in Florida and hopefully learn some things. And so we recognized early on that control of the psyllid, the Asian citrus psyllid, is a key element in preventing the spread of Wanglungbing. And so we've had the psyllid in this county for many, many years.
And can we just talk a little bit about where did it come from? I mean, how did it get to Florida? Mm-hmm. And then how did it get here?
So, invasive pests are usually foreign, right? They're something that we're not used to having here. They don't have natural predators here. And so this was, the Asian citrus psyllid came from Asia, and it's done, and it's not us, it can't fly over an ocean, right? So this is all moved through human activity. And so it was first introduced in LA County through, it was a backyard citrus tree from, a very well-intended, someone living in a country in Asia sent it over to the family living in, it was
like a little seedling.
A cutting.
Or
It was a cutting. And that's tradition for their culture. And so they wanted, a piece of the homeland, so to speak, in their new home in California. It's actually, a beautiful sentiment, but it was extremely detrimental. And that was the introduction of HLB. It was HLB infected plant material that was shipped.
Oh, wow.
It was found in Hacienda Heights. And that was the first, find of HLB in the state.
And not an issue probably back wherever that cutting was sent from.
Correct.
Because that insect is native to there.
Correct.
And there are predators.
Correct.
There are, right. So,
right.
Okay.
And so that's, so we know that these pests are moved through human activity. And so one of the things that we've learned with HLB is you have to control the spread of the psyllid, because the psyllid will feed on infected plant material and then go to a clean tree and feed on that and spread the disease that way. And so if you can keep your psyllid population down, you can slow the spread of HLB. So it's important to know that this insect itself is not deadly. If it, lands on you, bites you, whatever, it's not gonna bite you, but it's not, the insect itself is not. It's the disease that it spreads, and it's, as you mentioned, it's not deadly to us. It's just deadly to the tree. But this is good information for people, because now that we're actually dealing with what the quarantine means, we've been dealing with the insect for many, many years. And I credit the work of our agricultural industry in being so diligent with the applications of pesticides that were required to keep these populations down.
So required by the state?
By the state.
Okay.
These are protocols that are developed, through science on how best to control these populations. We held the insect off at bay. 8 years longer than predicted.
Wow.
So usually the disease follows the insect by 5 years. We held it off for 8 years longer than predicted.
So 14 years.
Yes. So
Wow.
we did, and I credit that to the great work we're doing in our county to keep those populations down. And so, unfortunately, we did find the disease. It was in a backyard tree in Santa Paula, so not in commercial ag. And so it has been slowly but surely spreading. We're up to 82 infected trees. And because again, we learned lessons learned from Florida, you have to get rid of the source of bacteria in order to not provide, the ability for the insect to spread it. And so it is absolutely essential that those trees get removed. And so the state has come, once HLB was found here, the state came in and a quarantine was declared. That was about a month after I started. And so there's all the protocols that have to go into place. So there's, survey that's being done, and again, in people's backyards, treatment that's being done, and tree removal that's being done. And so, and it's very, very important that people cooperate with those treatments. The treatments are being done by licensed professionals. They're being monitored by our office to ensure that the licensed professionals are doing their jobs correctly.
And it's not your office that is saying you have to apply this and that on these timelines. This is actually something developed by the state.
Correct. Yeah, we're helping support because we're the local agency and we're on the ground and we know our community. But yeah, no, this is actually being done by the California Department of Food and Agriculture and the USDA as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so the United States Department of Agriculture. And so we are just, the local people on the ground, and so we're helping support their efforts. They dictate how this quarantine works and the protocols, and we assist with that work. And so if someone, does not, refuses survey, refuses treatment, or refuses tree removal if an infected tree is found, then warrants are issued. And so
Really?
yes.
Oh, wow.
And
Okay.
so we've just recently had a batch of warrants that were served, and so those allow the state to come in and perform the work that they need to do to.
And now the goal isn't right to living in Ventura County. One of the best things is you could almost stick a 2x4 in the ground and something will sprout and you'll get a beautiful plant and maybe some fruit even, right? The goal isn't to prevent people from having these backyard trees, which
No,
we all
it's to
enjoy.
protect them.
The goal is actually not just to protect them, but to protect our industry
Correct.
as well.
Well, and sometimes when we say save our citrus or protect our industry, it doesn't actually hit home to the residents.
Right.
I mean, the ag industry understands what this means. They've seen it. They know it's a death sentence. They know what it means. But really, people have to understand, and it has to hit home. And so when we explain, this will kill your backyard tree too.
Right.
This is not just an agricultural pest in some faraway place. This is actually it is indiscriminate. It will kill your backyard trees just as easily as it will kill, actually more so, because
Right.
commercial ag is monitored and treated. So when people understand that there's no cure, it's indiscriminate, and it's going to kill your tree, people have to understand how it impacts them sometimes.
Yeah, yeah.
And so that's where CDFA has not been effective in communicating that message. We step in and try to provide that, local touch. And in many, many cases, we've been able to explain to people how critically important this is for everyone.
Right.
And so we've gotten a lot of cooperation just through, diplomacy, so to speak. So that happened the first month.
And then when you say quarantine, what does that mean exactly?
So it means a number of different things, but the most basic is that there are limitations on your ability to move your product. So farmers, if they're in a quarantine area, have to do some kind of mitigation in order to move their fruit. So you can't freely move your fruit from one place to another. And so, and those mitigations vary. So it can be a treatment. It can be a cleaning, a mechanical cleaning, before you can ship your product outside of a quarantine area. And so there are, where the HLB was found, there was a 5-mile radius drawn in every direction from that site.
Wow.
And so that 5-mile radius did include 2 citrus packing houses. So if you are growing in a quarantine area, you can freely ship to a packing house within your quarantine area.
Because it's in the area.
Yeah,
Right.
yeah. Without mitigation. And so once the fruit is cleaned and packed, it's considered not a host for HLB any longer.
Okay.
Because again, it's that psyllid, tiny little insect that spreads it. So once it's been gone, the leaves and stems are taken off, it's been cleaned, it's been washed, and it's been packaged, it's no longer a threat. And so it can then leave the packing house at that point and not be considered a host and not have restrictions on it.
But if one of those farmers within the quarantine zone was also one of these certified sellers at the farmer's market that was outside the quarantine zone, they wouldn't be able to bring that crop
unless
outside.
they can prove it was commercially cleaned.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. So
Which doesn't happen often with
Right.
a certified producer, because they're generally a smaller grower that's not
right.
commercially,
Right.
not going through a packing house. They're doing it themselves.
Right. So there is an impact on farmers' ability to, the whole export business that you were talking about. That impacts farmers' ability to sell what it is.
Definitely.
That they
And
create.
this was an issue when the second quarantine popped up. So
Okay.
so about a month after HLB was first found in Ventura County, the Queensland fruit fly was discovered in a Thousand Oaks residential neighborhood. Again, also a residential neighborhood. The second fly triggered a quarantine. And so the first fly was an anomaly. And when they found the first fly, I actually had someone from the state say, "Oh, don't worry. This is so rare. We're never going to find another one." They had found it in 2 different cases, one in the 80s and one in the 90s in like San Diego and Los Angeles. They never found another one. So no quarantine was ever established. So that's how rare this insect is. And so, of course, 2 months on the job, the second fly is found.
Of course.
And the first quarantine of its kind in North America was
Wow.
declared in Ventura County. And so the Queensland fruit fly is one of the worst, if not the worst, damaging agricultural pests in Australia. And so Australia grows similar things that we do, we have similar climates. And so we don't know what its potential is here in California. We don't want to find out. And so this was, taken very, very seriously. So again, a lot of this was found in a residential neighborhood, but it had an impact on surrounding ag. Ventura County is really unique in California in that we are equally ag and equally urban, which provides its own set of challenges. Monterey County, for example, is twice the ag, but half the people. And so we are truly unique. You have counties that are very, very ag oriented, and you have counties that are very urban. We are half and half. And so that provides its, unique challenges. So even though the insect was found in a residential neighborhood in Thousand Oaks, the quarantine that was declared, it was a 4-mile radius in this case, from the find point, it impacted about 100 farms.
Wow.
And so those farms had to undergo a series of bait treatments that had to be monitored. They had to do it every week up until harvest. And so the idea behind the bait treatment is that it wasn't a broadcast application. It was a very targeted spot, like say on the tree, it would go on the bark of the tree. And so the insect would be attracted to that spot. And it had a pheromone in it, which would attract the male species of the insect, and then insecticide in it, which would then kill the insect when it hit that spot. So, that's kind of evidence of the science behind this. And, you don't have to broadcast pesticides. You can just do a very targeted, and they called it a bait treatment. And so these growers had to do this every week up until harvest. And if they missed a treatment, it starts over. So it's really rigorous protocol that was required for these growers. And so, when you've got shrinking profit margins, like, the lemon industry has really been suffering due to foreign competition and other factors. So you've got an industry that's barely, breaking even. And now we've got all of these added costs
requirements,
to these bait treatments. You've got the material itself that you have to use, but also the labor. And because it's very targeted and precise, it's not a quick little spray. It's it's very precise, and it had to be monitored by the state. So you've got to make sure that your schedule is coordinated and timing was right. So there was a lot to this quarantine, and because it was brand new and the only one of its kind in North America ever, we were all kind of learning at the same time.
Yeah, that's I'm even developing the protocol,
right,
as to what to do,
right,
was all new,
right. And then unlike the Asian citrus psyllid and the Wanglungbing, which really only targets citrus, this had a huge host range. So anything that was a fruit was on this host list. So it impacted our strawberry growers, our blueberry growers, as well as our citrus growers and our avocado growers. So it was a very, very interesting process.
Wow.
But the good news about all the great work, and again, I credit our diligent work of our industry, is that we were able to successfully eradicate the Queensland fruit fly. And our county even received an award from the USDA.
Wow.
One of the highest awards that that the USDA provides us and other counties who were also successful in eradicating their quarantine. So ours was unique to the Queensland fruit fly was unique to Ventura County, but there was simultaneously there was a med fly quarantine going on, an Oriental fruit fly quarantine going on. And so those other counties also received, because they were able to successfully eradicate their fruit fly infestations. 2023 was a very strange year when it came to fruit flies. It was just this explosion.
Well, it was a wet year, right? Our
Yes.
second wet year.
Yeah,
And,
they attributed that, but again, they know that these flies are moved through human activity. So there's a lot we're looking at commerce, and how that is regulated. So, just to give you an idea, on an average year, we have about 75 fruit flies that are found. We had over 1,000 found in one year. So that was not just in Ventura County.
Right.
But, and so it was a very, very strange anomaly type year. And so anyway, there was a lot of work being
I know one of
on.
some of the work that your office was doing, and we kind of helped a little bit, but was also a public service campaign,
outreach,
because this was happening right before the holidays.
Correct.
Right. And what do people do during the holidays? They come home to mom and dad's place, grandma, grandpa's place, and before they leave, that hey, go pick some of the oranges off my tree in the backyard. Go, or take these lemons or whatever, and you had a huge public campaign about don't move your fruit,
Right.
which I thought was brilliant.
Right.
and
Well, again, these fruit flies are moved through human activity. They've proven that. And so, a very innocent act, can be extremely detrimental, And so we're a mobile society, we were dealing with the Queensland fruit fly here in Ventura County, but simultaneously in LA, we were dealing with medfly and in, Riverside and San Bernardino, these counties that, people, they go visit grandma in Riverside and she hands you a bag of oranges. And then all of a sudden we've got, medfly that we're dealing with. So
Right.
it was, it was really critical that we explain to folks that, don't share your citrus, don't share your backyard fruit, don't share fruit, eat the fruit, consume the fruit,
Enjoy
where
it,
it's grown,
right.
enjoy your fruit, because it's not harmful. It's just the pests that you could be spreading could be very, very detrimental. And so that was, an interesting campaign of,
Yeah.
kind of like the firewood, burn it where you buy it kind of thing. It's like consume your fruit where you grow it, because this very innocent act of sharing can be very, very detrimental.
Right. Wow. And present a risk that, no one
would necessarily have thought of.
Exactly. And so that clearly is and will continue to be, right, quite a challenge,
Right,
for agriculture here in Ventura County. The need to be ever vigilant through your office's inspections, keeping abreast of other quarantines in other areas, what could be coming our way, and the like. But that's not the only threat that our local ag industry is facing.
right.
The list is probably a foot long.
Absolutely.
But from water to like the urban encroachment, things like that. But what, in your opinion, from your viewpoint as the ag commissioner, is one of the biggest threats that we face? What do you see as being a huge challenge to keeping ag viable?
It's kind of like the expression, death from a thousand knives. I feel like it's a lot of things that are impacting ag versus I don't see one, I can call out a few. I don't see one as being, this huge overriding factor. I think the sheer amount of challenges that our growers are facing is what makes it so difficult. I mean, one of the things that I love about Ventura County's agriculture is, we have a very progressive set of farmers here. They're innovative. They have been hit by natural disaster after natural disaster,
Yes.
and they have, foreign competition, labor shortages, water, land availability, all of the traditional things. But then on top of it, all of these natural disasters. It's just we are very, very resilient here in Ventura County. But even very, very resilient people hit their max, hit their wall.
Every rubber band runs out of elasticity.
Exactly.
Right? Yeah.
And so, you do wonder, gosh, what's next? What's the straw that's going to break the camel's back here? But I would say it's a combination of various challenges. I know there was a study that came out, by Cal Poly recently about the rising costs, the regulatory costs.
Yes.
And that's a challenge. Shrinking profit margins. I mean, one of the things that we talk about, one of my jobs prior to taking on the role of ag commissioner was I did the crop and livestock report every year. I did it for 12 years. And you notice that $2.1 billion mark was very stagnant. We hovered around $2 billion for, a decade.
And just so that our listeners understand that annual crop report is a report of the gross revenues.
Correct, of everything that's grown and produced in Ventura County, but gross revenues only. And so when you have a stagnant number like that, we all know, I mean, even if you're not a farmer, that costs are going up, right? I mean, my $16 salad is now a $25 salad, but the growers are not getting that their costs are rising, their profits are staying stagnant,
Right.
or their gross revenues, I should say, are staying stagnant. So their profits are shrinking, and so that's a big problem. Are people willing to pay more for their creative strawberries?
Well, and where is that more going, right? Because I think that Cal Poly study that you mentioned, and I'm hoping that, in a future episode, we can bring one of the report researchers here,
Yeah.
and talk more about it. But what they found is that, in a 14-year period, and these are rough numbers coming from me because I don't have the report in front of
Right.
me, but in like a 14-year period, the cost for ag to comply with the regulatory requirements in the state of California increased something like 1,700%.
Right.
But over that same period of time, the value of the crop that they were looking at, which happened to be lettuce, increased less than 1%.
Correct.
So what the farmers are getting is flat.
Right.
But what the farmers are paying
Is increasing.
is actually, a Mount Everest climb.
Absolutely.
So, yeah.
I think that is a huge challenge is, how much longer are people going to be willing to operate at a loss? And that's a scary situation
Right.
for ag. I think foreign competition is a problem. I know it's definitely impacted the lemon market here in Ventura County. Scarcity of labor, that was a challenge, before, this has been a challenge for many years in this county.
Right,
And so,
right.
who knows what's going to happen, moving forward. And so
Right.
there's definitely some uncertainty there. And then the general ones, when you're competing, you have a limited finite amount of land and you have a limited finite amount of water. And so, the competition for that is a challenge. And then, you've got this pressure to reduce the use of pesticides, which is great, but you've got this looming in our mobile society. We just discussed the pest threat, right?
Right,
And so
right.
tools are being taken away for farmers to deal with these invasive, deadly pests, and no new tools are coming onto the market. And so, farmers are losing their ability to fight their battles with these invasive pests. I mean, people need to remember, like, farmers don't use pesticides because they want to. They need them. They use them because they have to. It's one tool that they use.
Right.
And they're very expensive, right? So they're not applied indiscriminately. They're applied as a last resort in most cases. And so,
And under a directive in a lot
often,
of cases, right?
right. And,
A
in the case
government
of a
directive,
quarantine, they
yeah.
have to apply.
Yeah.
So, but people forget that pesticides are used to control pests. So, back in the day, I remember my dad saying that, you'd bite into an apple and that little cartoon of lowly worm,
Yeah.
he's all, that actually happened. Every time you bit into an apple, there was a worm in it. People forget, like, that we don't want that as consumers, right? We don't want worms in our apples anymore. So we're not, for the most part, people don't want to buy produce that has, holes in it, right?
Right.
Evidence
Blemishes.
that blemishes, evidence that pests have been there. So people have forgotten that we use pesticides to control pests. It's not because we want to.
Right.
And that's where our job comes in, is to make sure that they're being used safely. And we take that role very, very seriously.
Yeah. Yeah. And, one thing that I think, a lot of conversations that you and I have, going back to the realization that Ventura County is, it's one of the few places, I think, on the planet where you have a city and you have agriculture.
Yes.
And they're right next to each other, or sometimes intertwined.
Right.
And, I know a lot of the conversations that you and I have is how do we balance, right, the need for more housing for the cities to continue to develop and grow to support, a viable overall economy versus what that sometimes inadvertent, sometimes unintended conflict
Right.
between the two are. And that I think is something very unique, a unique challenge to our area.
Absolutely. The ag-urban interface, as we
Yes,
say.
yes.
It does, and it is, I mentioned earlier, Ventura County is unique in
Right.
that way.
Right.
We have, Kern, Tulare, Fresno, they're very ag-centric counties. Orange, LA, San Bernardino, urban counties, right? Some counties in Northern California. Ventura County being equally ag and equally urban, we still rank in the top 10 in the state, which means we rank in the world. We are still a viable contender statewide. And so that ag is worth protecting. But we also live in a beautiful, temperate place that everyone wants to move
Right,
to.
right.
And so we have to balance that, ag-urban interface is a constant challenge that people are dealing with in this county.
Yeah, and I think it's more than just these people here are going to complain about the dust, say,
Right.
from working the fields or the early morning hours or whatnot that go along with ag operations. It's that having housing adjacent to ag operations or having some sort of development that attracts people, attracts their pets. That means that farmers struggle to comply with federal food safety laws. They struggle to comply with the ability to apply the tool that is pesticides because of pesticide use buffers. And so it's more than just can't we all get along as good neighbors?
Right.
There's regulatory challenges that are created when the urban interface abuts
Absolutely.
next to ag.
Absolutely. We often get people who have moved into the area who will call our office and complain. And it's like, you moved into this area because you were attracted to its beauty. You moved next to ag because you loved the look. But many people are not tolerant of the inconveniences that living next to that look provides. You mentioned dust. One of the roles we serve is we have a right to farm ordinance in this county, and so we often play referee, so to speak, when we get those complaints that we refer to as right to farm. So generally it's an urban neighbor that comes in and is complaining about whatever activity is going on, and then we have to determine whether or not that this activity is a standard practice, essentially. And so if it is determined that this is a standard agricultural practice, then they are protected from nuisance complaints. And so what we often find ourselves is getting people to get along and be good neighbors. And often it's on the side of the farmer where they're having to adjust
Right.
and modify what they do. They've been, and it's a little unfair. They were there first, right? But they often do just to keep the peace.
Right.
And because neighbors can make or break you in this county. And we've seen that time and time again where fields are rendered, practically infarmable, not because of the soil. I mean,
Right.
Yeah, they talk about Oxnard being one of the 7 agricultural wonders of the world. We've got like 100 feet of topsoil. I mean, it's not our inability to grow.
Right.
It's a field that's been surrounded by urban encroachment that renders it nearly impossible to farm because of what is required when you do farm and the tolerance level of the people that live there.
Right, right. And I think, like one of the goals of this podcast is to help educate people and build that understanding, right? About why you see what you see when you live next to or drive past a a farm field, and kind of recreate the or help to recreate the sense of overall community. Right, we're all in this together.
Right.
But I know that there's still a lot that needs to be done, so that people understand that farmer isn't choosing to start work at 4 a.m.
Right. Right.
He's got a harvest window.
Right.
and that's simply how the work has to go.
One of my favorite complaints that I've received was, people, agricultural practices vary depending on what's being grown.
Right.
And so I had someone call me and say, tell that farmer to put the orange trees back in.
Oh,
Because they moved in next to the oranges, and the oranges were, for the most part, before the Asian citrus seal, we rarely did anything to oranges.
Right.
And I had to explain to that person, I cannot tell the farmer to plant his orange.
What to grow. and
Yeah,
what
because
to
now
plant, right?
it was replaced by row crops, and the row crops are, a much more intensive kind of agriculture where you have,
Right.
tilling and, more activity, more harvest. So there's a lot, it's a different type of farming. And so
Right.
even if you were, perhaps understood the ag you were getting into, ag changes, right? It's dynamic. And so we have to look at this when we are doing, one of the areas I didn't go into is we provide environmental analysis for projects when they're proposed within a certain distance of agriculture. And so, we have to consider that ag changes, right? So just because it's an orchard today, which is very, little impact, right? It's not very intensive for the most part. We have to anticipate that this could be strawberries tomorrow,
Right.
which is, much more of an intensive kind of farming.
Right.
So, so keeping that in mind when we do that, is ag will change, and can change and will change, and has to change
And
to
has
survive.
to change. Right. And that a lot of it is driven by. In fact, I'm gonna actually claim that all of it's driven by things that are really outside of the farmer's control. Right.
Right.
For ag to survive, a farmer has to be growing marketable products.
Correct.
And for those products to be marketable, it has to be there has to be a support system behind the farmer to get the export, to protect the crop from pests and the like. And so some of the changes we're seeing, lemons being removed in favor of avocados, right? Is all being driven by these external forces.
Right.
So,
Right.
yeah.
I mean, you think about how our county has changed over time. I mean, we were a sugar beet county,
Right.
right?
Right.
Then we were a walnut county. And then, for many decades, we were a citrus county. And now, strawberries, since, 2000s have, outpaced lemons, tremendously. And so who knows what the next decade will be like? Who knows what the
Right.
next crop will be? So we have to be, we have to have that adaptability and be able to change. And it does. We are, it's not that people didn't want to continue growing those things. It's
Right.
They needed to.
Right.
You know.
They needed to adjust. And but then any community, any organism, let's say, right? It's grow or die. And that's simply a fact of nature. Yeah. So looking at, some of the changes that are happening at the county, one that strikes me is over the last 5 years or so, maybe a little bit longer, we're seeing an influx of women leaders in agriculture. We're actually seeing, an earlier guest, Lisa Tate, is one of a large group of women actually who returned to take over the family farms, daughters returning to take over the family farms. And now, Farm Bureau leadership is female, collab leadership is female.
I'm the first
You're
female
the
ag
first
commissioner.
female ag commissioner. You know, what do you see, you know, for the future? What do you think about this change, and you know, how is what we bring as women to the table going to benefit agriculture?
I am super excited to see Farm Bureau, CoLab, Ag Commissioner's Office, UC Cooperative Extension, all work to support agriculture together. And, you know, whether it's women or men, it's exciting to see that happen.
Yeah.
In my experience, you know, it didn't, you know, people didn't work together. We had our kind of separate duties and roles, and I've always felt that if ag, I mentioned to you earlier, you know, I've always felt that if ag could work together, it'd be a powerhouse. And so what's really exciting is seeing that collaboration right now. It's happening. We're seeing Farm Bureau work together with CoLab, and we're seeing things get done. And, you know, whether that's to women's credit or not, who's to say, but it is exciting to see us all working together towards a common goal and getting things done.
Yeah,
You know?
and I think it shifts, you know, the historical narrative, right? It is a little, it's non-traditional to see so many daughters coming back to take over the family farms, and I think it brings an energy,
Absolutely.
and you know, we as women like to talk together, you know, and chat things over, and you know, and I'm feeling like that may be contributing a little bit to the collaboration, but regardless, I think it's exciting for the future.
I do too. I
So-
mean, it is an interesting phenomenon that we're seeing all of these farmers' daughters, so to
Yes.
speak,
Yeah.
now in control, and it's you know, it's nice that women are being recognized in this area, because we do bring a lot to the table,
Right.
and so you know, I'm excited to see this and look forward to what we can do together.
Yeah, and that's not to say that, you know, women ever lacked for extremely valuable and important roles in running the family farms, right?
Sure.
But now to see them actually into what we would call these leadership positions,
Absolutely.
is
Yeah, being recognized for their work.
yes, yep,
Yeah, the work was always there, but
Yes,
was it always
exactly.
recognized? And I think
Exactly.
that's you know, one of the key differences.
yeah, yeah. And so, well, Korinne, this has just been a wonderful conversation.
Thank you.
But I do have one question for you.
Sure.
And that is, what are we not talking about with regards to agriculture that we need to be talking about?
Well, you know, I'd like to talk about some of the, you know, positive things we have going right now. I mean, there is a lot of doom and gloom and uncertainty. I'd just say the word of the year in 2025 could probably be
Uncertainty, yes.
uncertainty, right? We have some amazing assets here in this county. We mentioned that, you know, we've got perfect weather. We can grow just about anything year round. We've got, you know, great soil. We have very, very progressive, innovative farmers who are willing to adapt and are resilient to, you know, and open to change. And we've got an incredibly supportive board of supervisors that
Yes, yes.
feels like for the first time in a very long time we have a board that's, you know, willing to work together to help support agriculture as a whole. You know, we've got, you know, great research that's going on in so many different areas. We have a lot of things that that we need to remember and focus on when the challenges seem so overwhelming. You know, one of my jokes is I am worried that, you know, there won't be any ag left to commission one day. I want to make sure that my job here is to make sure that I keep this all going for the future and the next generation. And I say this in my personal life. I never want to drive by the family farm and see condos and point to my show my grandkids that's where your mom your grandma grew up.
Right.
I don't want to see that in Ventura County. I don't want to see us give up our rich agricultural heritage. I want to see ag flourish, and there's a lot of answers to that question. How do we keep ag economically viable in this county? And I think there's multiple answers to that. I would like to see, we haven't discussed SOAR, but I think, one of the intentions of SOAR, I think the intention of SOAR was very, very well intended, right? But I don't know that it's exactly doing what we hoped it would do, right?
Or is it that I've had conversations with farmers in other areas, other counties, and a few of them have remarked that, man, I wish that we had had a SOAR type ordinance where we are, because we're down to fighting over our last couple thousand acres of agriculture, right? I'm wondering if the conversation is that SOAR has succeeded so well in preserving our agricultural land that now, how do we improve it to save farming itself?
Correct.
Right?
That's what I mean. I think when you look at the intention behind SOAR, and growing up, I was always told, SOAR was, a bad thing, right? It was hindering farmers' ability to be profitable. That's kind of the mindset I had. But then, in this job, I've talked to many farmers who felt that, the intention was really to keep those land values to where you could continue to farm. Have we achieved that with SOAR? I think that's one of the questions we need to ask. And is that, are we really saving our agricultural resources? We know we have to allow ag to be profitable. And so I think that some discussion needs to be made on how we do that. And I think there's a lot of answers to those questions, and people who are a lot smarter than I am need to come to the table and talk about how we can work together to face those challenges and maintain this very, very important agricultural heritage in our county, but also allow that heritage to thrive and be sustainable economically. Sustainability is one of those terms that's got 100 definitions and not a single one.
Yes.
And one of them is you have to be economically sustainable too.
And I think no one would argue the fact that not a single business, not a single industry today is the same as what it was 30 years ago.
Right.
And until we can address what does agriculture need today as an industry, right? How do we add value added?
Correct.
Either food processing, other ag tourism,
Right.
Things like that. Until we start having those conversations, how are we addressing the ag industry of the future?
Right. And, we talked about, keeping people in farming. Well, one issue is allowing the next generation to be able to build a home on their own farm. Not for,
Right.
not to be able to rent out and make a profit, but to actually live on that farm and keep that farm going versus buying a house somewhere else. So I think we need to think about things like that.
Right.
So I think, again, the intentions behind SOAR are great, but I think, you mentioned this was written in the 90s, right?
Right.
Things have changed, and I think that, it may be time to take a look at some of these with the intent that we all want to keep ag in this county, right?
Right.
It's just, how do we do that?
How do we do that, and how does the language within the actual ordinance itself, right? Because what we see is with policy, with regulation, the devil's in the details, right? And so how do we readdress to meet the intent and what the citizens of Ventura County have clearly expressed they want, keeping ag. But what does ag look like today?
Right. Right.
Is the part that we're lacking.
Just like
Right.
the complaint that I received, make the farmer put the orange trees
Right,
back.
right.
We can't do that,
Can't do
right?
that.
We can't burden the farming community with an unprofitable albatross on their backs, right?
Right.
We need to be able to allow them to be able to be economically sustainable and profitable. Otherwise, it won't, the next generation's not going to want to farm. Farming's hard. Farming's, difficult.
Or even if they want to, they're not going to be able to,
Right.
because of the disparity in our gross revenues not
Right.
increasing,
Right,
while our costs are.
right.
And how do we shift and allow for more than just cultivation?
Absolutely. Yep.
Yeah, and like you pointed out, the whole succession to the next generation. So, some challenging discussions,
Absolutely.
I think, ahead, but necessary ones.
Absolutely.
And ones that I think we need to continue to push, our electeds, leadership, and the agricultural community to start having.
Absolutely. What we have is worth fighting for. And I think we
Absolutely.
need to keep that in mind, is that this county, this agricultural heritage, this, our being a top 10 contender is worth fighting for, and keeping us relevant.
Absolutely, absolutely. And even, could we expand it?
Right. Right.
Right? I mean, there's like you said, Ventura County has so many unique things that make it such an agricultural powerhouse.
Right.
So,
Well, we're working in the right direction. I mean, seeing ag work together is a great step. And then the other things I mentioned about a supportive board, having world-class research going on right in our door, backyard. I think we've got all the elements available for success.
yeah.
We've just got to keep fighting, and it's worth protecting. It's worth.
I 100% agree. 100% agree. Well, thank you, Korinne.
You're welcome.
This
Thank you.
has been a fantastic conversation.
Thank you for the opportunity. I'm really proud to serve as Ag Commissioner for such a wonderful county.
Well, and we are just thrilled that you are our Ag Commissioner.
Thank you.
So. And thank you for joining us for another episode of Ag on the Edge. Be sure to like, subscribe, and share our podcast with a friend. Thanks.